You've got your Mac guys here on a football Monday. We got a couple of countdowns going on to the NFL draft, which is now just 17 days to the start of the season, to the day that the Eagles get their other starting safety. Johnny Mac, we know after this weekend, it is not going to be Rodney McLeod rejoining the Eagles' defensive backfield. He signs a deal with the Indianapolis Colts, so the Eagles are still on the lookout for their starting safety pairing for this upcoming year. We know Anthony Harris is back, but Rodney McLeod won't be after 6 really good years, including a championship here in Philadelphia. Why isn't Rodney McLeod an Eagle again?
I think, the plan the entire time was to sign one of the 2 starters from last year. So it kind of re-signed. They were both scheduled to be free agents, and the Eagles essentially decided on Anthony Harris. And look, at the beginning, I said McLeod was more likely to come back from Harris, but I give the Eagles a little credit. The reason I went in that direction is because of Rodney's, sort of leadership status on this team, what he means to the community off the field. On the field, Jonathan Gann is the defensive coordinator. He's more competent, more comfortable with Anthony Harris. He's a little bit younger, Anthony Harris, from that standpoint as well. So from a football sense, it probably made more sense to keep Anthony Harris. And they kept Anthony Harris. I was a little surprised by that. And ultimately, at the Maxwell Football Club, I can say this now, Rodney was there getting the humanitarian award and pretty much told myself and a few others that he wasn't going to be back. But he didn't want to make it public at that point. But the Eagles, it was clear they made their decision. Anthony Harris was signed that day. So, you never knew at the time if it was just emotional or something like that. But, it's ironic because those 2 are really good friends. They went to college together. Anthony Harris considers Rodney McLeod a bit of a mentor. So it's always difficult in the business of football. But they wanted one of them, and they didn't want both because they wanted to upgrade. And we'll see what they do in the draft. I think that's a logical position. Honey Badger's still out there. I think the Eagles will be involved in that if the market demands it and it comes down to where it's going to be 1 year and the numbers aren't outrageous. They would certainly consider bringing him in, but they wanted an upgrade and they wanted to keep one of them, and they made their decision. We'll see how it works out.
So you think it was a foregone conclusion because you just let us in on the reveal that you felt you needed to keep under your cap till now that it was going to be one or the other. There was no chance that both of these safeties were coming back to the Eagles, that they had to make a call to take one out of 2 and decided for that to be Anthony Harris, that that was something that they had predetermined.
Well, I think that was the plan. You never say never, because for instance, if you went through the process and you sign Anthony Harris and you go through the draft and you don't get the player you want, or you don't get a player you think can be a starter as a rookie, Tyrann Mathieu isn't available. He goes to the Rams to go win a Super Bowl, something of that nature. And then you revisit after the draft. If Rodney McLeod didn't sign anywhere by that point, they probably would have considered bringing him back, but it wasn't the plan. So, but everybody's got plans in life. The Eagles are wide receiver. We talk about all the time. The plan was to get Calvin Ridley. The plan didn't work out for obvious reasons. The plan here was to bring one of the 2 back, and Rodney found another gig. So there's no safety net to come back to the situation after the draft. But if everything fell into those categories I just said, and you get no draft pick, you get no Mathieu, you get no veteran safety, then they would have, revisited and said, well, let's bring back Rodney. But that wasn't the goal. The goal was to upgrade at least one of the 2 positions and then sort of save one position for some, consistency and Jonathan's just more comfortable with Anthony Harris, which is understandable.
Here's one of the questions I have about replacing Rodney McLeod. And I would love to give credit to who said, maybe you can remind me. I'm pretty sure it was here with us on Birds 365, not on one of my WIP shows, but it might have been. So I can't say for sure. Shame on me for not remembering who it was. They did point out that Rodney McLeod got better as the season went on. That he was a guy who was still recovering from an injury when the season got underway. Sometimes we kind of forget these things, that a guy was returning from an injury and wasn't up to 100% speed when the season started, but got actually healthy as the season went on. Usually we think of it as the other way, that players wear down over the course of the season, that Rodney might have been a guy who was actually getting better as the season went on, made the big play in week 16 against Washington, which helped them secure a playoff spot. That might be a real honest read on Rodney McLeod's last season. And if it is, then you have to judge his season accordingly. There was a drop-off in production. He wasn't the same player that he was on the Super Bowl team back in 2017, but he was a guy who was getting better. Do you think that his season was at all misleading this year?
No, because I think that was a little bit expected. I mean, he tore his ACL in December in the prior season, so 2020. So that's very late, obviously. And you remember, I think he missed the first 4 games this year, so he was, still rehabbing from the ACL. So it's sort of natural to not feel comfortable coming back from that injury. And as he got more comfortable as the season went on, he started playing a little bit better. Then it's the old chicken and the egg. The Eagles' schedule also got easier. They were playing bad quarterbacks. I think the biggest thing, though, is in June, I think, is Rodney. Rodney will turn 32. So, you know how this league, we talk about it all the time, especially defensive backs, 32, 2 torn ACLs. Remember, he tore his other ACL a couple of years prior. I think all of that factors into it. And, Anthony's been a little bit healthier as well, a little bit younger, as I said. And both were going to be cost effective. So the price wasn't going to be an issue with either. And they made a decision. They wanted to bring back one. They made their decision. I think Rodney can still play. We'll see if he earns a starting job in Indianapolis. But you 32-year-old guys in this league with an injury history, it's always going to be tough for them.
Here's where I can side with the Eagles if they got the evaluation right, that the player's skills were diminishing. The fact that he's a guy who's gone through a lot of injuries, that's just facts, and you need to factor that in your decision making. If you think that his level of play isn't what used to be, then you have to make a football call. You got to make a football decision, and the Eagles have, that they decided to go with Harris over Rodney McLeod at this time. I've seen a bunch of stuff on social media about how diligent a philanthropist that he was here in Philadelphia, and the great charity work that he's done, and the fact that he was committed to doing both great work on the field and off the field. And while I applaud it and salute him and would give my high five right here with us on Birds 365, that can't factor into your football decision. You have to purely leave it up to what can he give us on the field. You can appreciate him. You can appreciate the work that he's done and lend a helping hand if he is committed to keeping his foundation in place in Philadelphia here. You can't be affected by that. You have to make a football decision. And I give the Eagles credit for that. Oftentimes, they go a little bit longer with players who have been here, who have contributed, who have been part of the organization. That was not the case here, and I think it was a cold, harsh reality that they had to deal with. Do you think Rodney McLeod's got anything left in the tank? Is he going to help the Colts?
I think he's got something left in the tank. I think he can still play. I think he's probably better suited to be a rotational, sort of at the end of the last season, the Eagles went to essentially a rotational type of situation where, Rodney was used to his entire time here playing basically every single play. And he admitted it was a little bit difficult for him when they started mixing Marcus Epps in, who's part of this as well, because the Eagles really like him as a coverage safety. Um, and if you have that third safety to rotate in, if you want to go with that sort of philosophy, and a lot of teams don't, and a lot of teams consider that as a non-rotational position. I'm not sure if he can play every single snap at this stage of his career, but yeah, he can still play. I mean, and Frank Reich obviously knows him very well, and um, we'll see how it works out. I don't know the situation with Indianapolis at safety. I know they were kicking the tires on Honey Badger as well. They were one of the teams in that, so they're obviously looking for a safety. Um, so he should be able to help. But if you're looking for Rodney McLeod at his apex, that's probably not going to happen anymore.
Fair enough. What does the year 2016 mean to the Philadelphia Eagles after this weekend, John? There's a dual significance to that year.
After this weekend, that's Doug's first year. I don't know where you're going.
I'll fill in the blanks for you. 2016 was the year Rodney McLeod joined the Philadelphia Eagles. And 2016 was the last year that the latest Eagles signing actually played football. That Devon Allen, a wide receiver, former Oregon Duck,
I should have got
signed with the Eagles this year. Nothing like signing a guy who hasn't played football in 6 years, John. Give us the background on this free agent signing, undrafted free agent signing.
Well, Devon is an Olympian, so he sort of made a decision. He played at Oregon as a wide receiver. Yeah, it was a pretty decent deep threat, I think, in 2014, which was the year after Chip Kelly left Oregon to come to Philadelphia. And then he sort of made a decision, if you want to be an Olympic sprinter, you can't, well, in his case, hurdles, 110-meter hurdles, you can't sort of go all in on both. So he went more in that direction, and he made 2 Olympics. I think he finished 5th and then 4th. So he's, high level hurdle, 110-meter guys. So, and now he's 27, and he decided, well, if I'm going to try it, I gotta try it now, because you're going to age out pretty quickly and people aren't going to consider it. So he went and he showed up at Oregon Pro Day, and he ran, I think, a 4.35. So you know how people in this league feel about speed, Jody. And this is a kid that can catch the football. I mean, he's played football before. He's not just a track guy trying to play football. So I think it's a worthy roll of the dice. But yeah, I think a lot of people saw this signing and thought that the Eagles are trying to, make him into a contributor this season. I think this is their classic, if you want to go to Jordan Mailata, would be the biggest example of a developmental prospect, Tyree Jackson. But this is sort of like Brett Toth, when they signed Brett Toth coming back from the Army. Same type of thing. That happened in August, though, because at the time, I hate to bring up this name, but at the time the president was Donald Trump, and he changed the rules for service members, in that they could have a deferral and if they had a chance to play professional sports. And the Eagles brought in Brett Toth because they liked him as a prospect, and the plan was to get him on the practice squad and help him develop, and hopefully turned into a player. Same thing here. Eagles got a guy who can run. They're obsessed with speed, can catch the football a little bit. But yeah, they're not people took this as they're signing him to be a receiver because they need an upgraded receiver, which they still do. This is just a developmental project. And yeah, why not? I mean, the guy can run by everybody. And I always laugh at Tyreek Hill, because he's been doing it for years, joking about he'd be able to beat Usain Bolt in a race. No, you wouldn't. You couldn't even beat Micah Parsons. You can't beat high level Olympic track stars. This guy can really, really run. So, roll the dice.
It's a little bit of a lottery ticket play.
Yeah.
If you cash it, it's great. If you don't, it's no great loss. Be interesting to see how much, if there was a couple teams interested in him, the Eagles have to put in for guaranteed money, standard 3-year deal for undrafted free agents. It all comes down to how much the guarantee is. But if he's at an age where you can't take forever to bring him along. When they drafted Jordan Mailata, they knew they had years before they were going to have to call on him and put him into game. It's going to be a little quicker here, but they have all of training camp and probable practice time squad to continue to evaluate the guy. But I just thought it was a very interesting story. Signing a guy who hasn't played football in 6 years.
Yeah, well, that part went over well. Went over like a lead balloon. But that, those people they think he's here to, play immediately. He's not. But you're right. The time has to be, the clock has to be sped up a little bit. So my thought there would be they would want, a year on the practice squad, and hopefully by next year, if he gets, sort of knocks the rust off, who knows, let him run by people and see what happens. Of course, they already have that with Quez Watkins, but I digress.
Yeah, good. But Quez, they're already leaning on. This would be a down the road proposition. All right, John McMullen, Jordan McDonald, your Mac guys here on Birds 365. The countdown to the draft is on. We're just over 2 weeks away. What will the Eagles be doing? How's the first round going to shake out? We're going to do some NFL draft guests over the next however many shows before we get to day one of the NFL draft, including coming up next. Russ Brown is a guy I got to know over the last several weeks. Someone booked him for my show on CBS Sports Radio, came on, did a heck of a job breaking down the draft for us. We will punch him up next here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you. Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
John McMullen and Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365. The countdown to the NFL draft is on, and we've got a guest joining us to give us some insight as to what's shaking out a couple of weeks before we actually get down to day one and the pickings of the new NFL talent. Russ Brown is the guy who had on my national radio show a couple of weeks ago, and I see via his Twitter that he's also doing some new work now for Woodward Sports Network. Russ, first of all, thanks for jumping on board. What is Woodward Sports Network?
Mac, man, it's great being back with you. Appreciate you having me on. But yeah, Woodward Sports Network is a basically a year-old Detroit sports media company. They really emphasize on video and audio. They're connected on a couple of the FM stations out here in Metro Detroit. So they brought me in to do a draft show for them. And, we'll be doing a live draft show in a couple of weeks when the draft kicks off. So pretty exciting stuff. My lifelong goal is always to just be like on radio, and it's slowly happening. So we're just kind of letting it ride, and we'll see how long we can go for.
Well, Russ, since you're in Detroit, let's start at the top of the draft and 1-2. And yeah, I think everyone kind of looks at the edge rushers and how it's going to shake out. Is that where you think Jacksonville and Detroit are going to go in that type of direction?
I do believe that. I still, part of me wants to believe, and maybe it's just me being hopeful, that the best player in the draft ends up falling in the laps of Detroit. But part of me believes that maybe Jacksonville is still spinning the tires on looking at an offensive tackle in this group, like an Evan Neal, because he's so explosive of an athlete. He's just got terrific size. He's very versatile on the offensive line. And if you really are going to build things around Trevor Lawrence, another offensive lineman makes a lot of sense. And also some things that I've just kind of gathered over time is that there's a chance that Cam Robinson might not have signed his franchise tag yet. And I find that very interesting. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I'm not there signing the paperwork or anything, but it certainly has sounded like maybe he's been hesitant on signing things, or they've been hesitant on having him sign things. And maybe it's because they want to see who they're actually going to end up taking here. Again, I still think if I had to put the pickings today, it would be Aiden Hutchinson 1, Kayvon Thibodeau 2, or an outside chance of Malik Willis at 2.
All right, so you said maybe the best player drops to the Lions at number 2. Is that in your mind, Aiden Hutchinson? If the Jags were to go with an offensive lineman in number 1, is there a big difference between Hutchinson and Thibodeau with the second pick in the draft?
Not really. I mean, I think it's more so just they both play a little bit different from each other. They have great flexibility off the edge. They both have really good length for the position. But I think the thing that just sets Hutchinson apart is just that constant motor. I mean, he never turns it off. You watch those games, he is just going time and time again. And I think that really separates him from Kayvon. Not saying Kayvon doesn't work, not saying he takes plays off. It's very evident when Hutchinson is on the field, and you feel it every single time, whether it's against the run, on a passing play, whatever it is, he just is phenomenal at it. And he's just somebody that I think when I watched it, he just has like that it factor. And if you have that it factor, to me, you're that top player.
A little bit of a wild card could be Trayvon Walker from Georgia, who seems to be a little bit. I think everybody regards him highly, but I think more NFL people really like Trayvon Walker's ceiling as a player, maybe than sort of whatever you want to call it, social media, draft world has, not maybe caught up to that. Any inklings of Trayvon Walker going up that high in the draft?
I personally don't see it. That's just me. I mean, I don't see it from a production standpoint, from a player standpoint. He doesn't really work his hands as well as some of the other edge rushers in this class. He doesn't really have a pass rush plan for that matter. He is certainly somebody that has great length and just overall power for the position. He was a former power forward, former center back in the day in high school. He was a beast. Don't get me wrong there. I mean, he was a beast down in the paint. But at the same time, it's one of those players that's it's just not there yet. And he's very versatile. He can play in a variety of spots, but it's what is he going to play in the NFL? That's the thing that I need to know. Where's he going to play? Because in his career, he's only got about 800 career snaps. And that's telling to me. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson had like 850, 900 snaps alone this year. So if he was this good, why wasn't he playing? And I get it. They have a loaded defense, but if I'm taking you in the top 5 of the draft, you better be the best player on your team. And I don't even think he was the best player on that defense. So I have to view it from that standpoint. I think he's a first round type of player. I just wouldn't be taking him in the top 5. If you were, in the range of 12 through 20 or something like that, and you took that pick, that would make sense to me.
Russ Brown from cover1.net, our guest here on Birds 365. All right, that'll make my next question real easy. Who was the best player on that Georgia defense?
Yeah, I think it's Nakobe Dean. I know a lot of people are very hit or miss on him. They don't really like that he didn't test during the combine or during a pro day or anything like that because he's a little bit undersized. He's 6 foot, 228. But I just think how effective he is as a blitzer, the range that he has, the ability to scrape over the top, and just that sideline to sideline ability. He is that gifted. He is that talented. And he was the team leader of that defense. He put it all together. He's a great player off the field. He's a great player on the field, but even off the field, I mean, I think I've told you this before, Mac, man, he's, he hasn't had a B+ since the 8th grade year of middle school. He's a great student. He's just a great dude off the field. And maybe there's something missing that I haven't found out, but he seems to have kind of like that total package. And I see a top 10 player when I watch his tape, and I don't know if he's necessarily going to go top 10, but if I was a team in the top 10, I need a linebacker, that'd be the guy I'd get.
Yeah, people are trying to will the Eagles to take a linebacker, Russ, but they haven't taken an off-ball linebacker since 1979 in the first round. So until they do it, I'm not going to believe it. But obviously there would be 2 in Devon Lloyd as well in Utah. You got both those guys as top 20 picks. Where do you have them sort of landing?
Yeah, they're top 15 players for me. The only player that separates the two is Chris Olave, so it's relatively close between the two players. And it's one of those things where Devon Lloyd, he's so versatile, and you see the versatility off the edge that he provides, what he can do just in the middle. He's got great length. I mean, he's 6'3", really long arms, and he's just an impact type of player. And I think if you were a team, like I mentioned, if you're a team that's in the need of a linebacker, it's really kind of pick your flavor between the two. One's a little bit taller than the other one, but they both, I think, have very similar athletic profiles just from their athletic ability alone. So I wouldn't really hesitate if I had to take one of the two. I would just take one of the guys that I feel is best for my defense, and I'm moving forward. So if the Eagles were to take one of those guys, I mean, I don't know if they would have a preference. I mean, maybe it would more so be Devon Lloyd just because he is a little bit more versatile. He's not really that guy that you just plug in the middle. You can, like I said, do a lot of different things. So maybe that holds a little bit more value to the Eagles defense. But again, I don't know if one of them might be gone by the time they make that first pick in the first round.
Real quick as a follow-up before you
ahead.
jump in. Sorry, Jody.
Sure.
Because I think it's more likely that the Eagles would go linebacker in the second round where they're 51 overall. So who would your third, fourth guy, somebody in that range that they might think about jumping in the pool with?
That would be Chad Muma out of Wyoming. I think he's a little bit of an underrated player because he played at Wyoming. The talent level might not always be there when he's playing on a Saturday afternoon because it's not the SEC, but he's a great athlete. He is somebody that certainly has great size for the position, and I think when you watch him play, you see the coverage skills from him. You see his ability to be really efficient in the box. He's been a tackling machine for the last 2 seasons. I believe he's posted close to 100 tackles in the last 2 seasons in each season. So I think he's just somebody, if you put in that box role, he's going to find ways to make a difference in stopping the run. And again, he understands his drops in coverage, which is really important when you have, a mid-hook defender or you're going curl to flats, whatever it might be. I think he is somebody that can do that type of role for you. So I like him quite a bit. And if he was there in that second pick, somewhere in that second round for them, or I should say their third pick of the draft in that second round, that would make a great selection for them.
All right, 2-part question, Russ, and it's about one specific player. The first part is, I want you to give me your analysis, where you think the player should go, your draft board, your evaluation of the individual. and then give me your projection as to what the NFL is thinking right now. Teams you've talked to, research you've done, how you think the board is going to fall and where the guy's going to come off. John and I are both very big fans of Kyle Hamilton. We're both gone on record as saying he might be the best football player in the draft. Plays a position safety that has been devalued by the NFL, and that certainly will affect his draft status. I've seen not one but two NFL drafts where Hamilton is dropping down at least to 15, where the Eagles have their first pick, if not further. One mock I saw this weekend had him going to the Patriots in the 20s, which means the Eagles would have passed on him twice.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. I think he's a top 5 talent. I know John thinks highly of him as well. Doesn't think the Eagles are getting him if they stay pat at 15. Give me your evaluation of the player and where you think the league sits with him right now. Where do you think he's going to be taken off the board on draft night?
I think he's a top 5 player. I'm with you guys there. I mean, he is certainly somebody that is in the top 5 of my board. He is actually 5th, but I mean, it's again, we're talking fractions of a point between, these top players, but he is a phenomenal player that's very versatile. You can play him as a single high safety. You can play him down in the box. You can do a variety of things with him that I don't think you can do with every single safety in this class. I mean, it's a very good safety group, but you can do a lot more with Kyle Hamilton, and it's just about finding the right fit. And I think that's where the issue is one, you see a relatively good athlete on tape, but then you see him running at the combine and at the pro days, and the long speed is a little bit questionable. He might get tested from time to time, but you're not really going to be asking him to run vertically in man-to-man coverage on the outside against, the faster receivers of the league. He's going to be playing over the top, down in the box, covering slot receivers, tight ends, running backs, things like that. So I think that's where he's ultimately going to play in the NFL. I think, it's funny on DraftKings on the draft position of these players. I was doing a show last Monday or 2 Mondays ago, and it was at 6.5 for Kyle Hamilton, and over 6.5 was like plus 150. And I was ready to jump all over it. The next day after his pro day, it dropped down to 8.5. So I think that's really where the range starts. It's going to be, around 8, 9, 10, 11. If he got past Washington, I would be quite surprised. I think it'll be that 8 through 12 range. Minnesota, new regime. If they were able to get a player like this to pair up with Harrison Smith, I think that's a great spot for him. But again, Washington at 11, that just makes a lot of sense with how their front 7 is. I still think there's teams that are in this top 15 that are really going to value him. But, there's been a lot of instances like this where these top players, they, for some reason, fall. CeeDee Lamb fell to 17 to the Cowboys. He was a top 5 player for me. Derwin James, same deal, fell to 17 to the Chargers. The NFL does some strange things. So I think if he falls to the Eagles, I would hope that they would take him.
I don't think they would, and that would create even a bigger problem.
You think they'd pass on him at 15, Johnny?
Yes, I do.
Wow.
Yes, I do.
I
think they pass on him twice, to be honest, if they have the opportunity. But that's just, that I just don't think Eagles are very into the valuation of positions in the top of the draft. Occasionally they come off that. I always tell the story about they really like Christian McCaffrey back in 2017, was it? Yeah. And they, typically are not even going to look at a running back that high in the draft. They were 14. They would have taken Christian McCaffrey in a second. So it always comes down to the player. But I haven't gotten any inkling from the Eagles about safety. We're thinking about the safety position, certainly in the first round. We do talk about defensive line here a lot, Russ, and we mentioned the edge rushers. So when you look at 15, my question to you is how many are going to be gone of the top 5 in the top 14 slots? And then defensive tackle, other than the big kid from Georgia, anybody, Jordan Davis, anybody top 15 level there?
We'll start with the edge rushers. I certainly think there'll be at least 3 off the board. You've got Hutchinson, you've got Kayvon, Jermaine Johnson will be in there. Outside of that, I don't know if George Karlaftis would go. David Ajabo would certainly be in the conversation if he didn't tear his Achilles. But then when you go to the interior part of the defensive line, I think there's a chance that maybe Jordan Davis could be gone just simply because of how well he tested. It would be, I think it would be tough for a team to pass on a player, one that physical, that big, and that athletic, somewhere in that top 15. But then, that would essentially be 4 defensive linemen in total. I would probably say the outside chance of Devontae Wyatt, and maybe that would be somebody that the Eagles would just be interested in because Fletcher Cox is only back on that 1-year deal. Maybe they would be interested in bringing in a guy like that to maybe develop under Cox and stuff like that. But overall, I would say 4 by the time we get to 15. I think there's certainly a chance of 3. I know that for a fact, but 4, I would roll the dice on 4.
All right, let's go to another position that the Eagles have an area of need. And they've shown the last couple of years they're not afraid to draft there. One was a hit, one was a miss. I'm talking about wide receiver. They may very well go wide receiver in the first round for the 3rd consecutive year. Seems like there's a group of 5 or 6 that are thought to be first-round talents. There isn't one that stands out where you go, he's going to go off the board, and then there'll be a drop-off. They all seem to be bunched together. And different mock people have different orders of how these wide receivers are going to play in the National Football League. Run down your rankings of wide receivers. Who do you think's off the board before 14? Does the guy who's left as the highest wide receiver seem to fit for the Philadelphia Eagles for you?
Yeah, between 11 through 21 on my board, there's 5 wide receivers. So, there's Drake London at number 1 as my top receiver. Chris Olave's there. Then it's Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams back to back. And Jamison Williams would be higher on the board if he didn't tear the ACL. I think he'll be fine as a player, but realistically, I don't see him being the first receiver off the board. Maybe there's a chance, but I don't think so. And then Jahan Dotson is at 21. So those are my top 5. Realistically, for the Eagles, I mean, I think that there's a chance that if Chris Olave was there, they would be really interested with him just because of how well of a route runner and the separation ability that he has. Obviously, the big playability of Drake London, you would love to have that for Jalen Hurts playing opposite of Devontae Smith. You could kind of rotate the 2 in and out of the slot, but I think Drake London will be off the board. I think there's a chance Garrett Wilson will be off the board as well, just because Garrett Wilson's a lot better of a route runner than given credit for, kind of plays it like the point guard position, always trying to cross guys over, doing those types of things, but he's also got tremendous body control. So, I mean, I think there's an outside chance of Chris Olave, and then obviously Jamison Williams, if they'd be interested in taking a guy like that just off the knee injury. Obviously, they've gone to the Alabama wide receiver well before. It's kind of worked out, so maybe they'll do it again. And then Jahan Dotson, maybe that's not the pick at 15. Maybe it's more so at 19. But I think that's somebody that would certainly be of interest of them, just because, one, he's right down the road, but also it's somebody that I think is got the ability to win at all 3 areas, all 3 levels of the field, but he's the best hands catcher of any receiver in the draft.
Guy you left off your top 5, who some other people have in that mix, is Treylon Burks, the kid from Arkansas. What is it about him that doesn't get him into your top 5?
Yeah, he was just somebody, like, when I first watched him, I started falling in love. And then it's like, it's like having that girlfriend, the first month's great. You guys love each other. Things are really good. And then all of a sudden, as time goes on, she moves into your apartment. And you're like, man, I don't really like this anymore. She's in my space. But no, he was just somebody that the more I watched, the more I was like, I like the player, but at the same time, I didn't. I just expected more. I love the versatility. I love that, they used him in a variety of ways with split zone looks and have him coming in and out of the backfield with orbit motions and jet motions. I love seeing that stuff for a 6'2", 225 receiver, and I'm fine with the 4.5, 540. I'm good with all that stuff. I thought I could have expected more. The route running isn't the same as guys like Olave and Dotson and even Garrett Wilson and stuff like that. And the big playability, Drake London outperformed him by a mile when you talk about big plays and things like that. And from 50-50 balls and just body control, there was times where I just wasn't there. And do I think he can go in the first round? Absolutely. Is it truly, pick your flavor out of those 6 receivers? Absolutely. But I think at the same time, if I had to choose, those would be the 5 that I would take. And then just a little bit later, I would take Treylon Burks.
All right, Russ, somebody's got to get those receivers to the football. And, this quarterback class has been debated by a lot of people, and most look at it as a little bit underwhelming compared to an average year. You mentioned a little bit about Malik Willis, a little outside chance he might go number 2 overall. But I want to know how many quarterbacks you think are going to go in the first round of this draft, and where this class as a whole is against other classes. Are people being a little bit too hard on it? You think they got it right? Where are we with this quarterback class?
I think everybody's kind of in agreement that it's just not the same that we've seen over time. I mean, we've kind of been spoiled in previous years. The Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen group was a very good group for a college group of quarterbacks. Sure, not all of them have transitioned well to the NFL, but I think you even look at last year, we have Trevor Lawrence in the mix there. You've got Justin Fields there. Like we've been a little bit spoiled. You go back to, that 2013, 2014 draft where there was just, bad quarterbacks. That's just what it was, but they still went because you pay the premium for it. I think it's the same thing here. I think there is, though, the potential of guys like Kenny Pickett coming into the league, starting right away and doing okay. Guys like Malik Willis, who could be really bad or really good. And I think that's what's ultimately going to get him drafted, because you don't want to be the team that misses out on him or passes on him to let somebody else go. So realistically, I think we could see 3 quarterbacks in the first round. I think Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett, we can lock them in. It's just a matter of kind of where they go. I've always said Kenny Pickett to Carolina makes a lot of sense. David Tepper, former Pitt grad, he obviously goes to Pitt. Matt Rule recruited him at Temple, then Matt Rule goes to Baylor, and he transfers over to Pitt or commits to Pitt. So I think there's a lot of connecting the dots there. Again, Malik maybe at 2, but still, I like Atlanta at 8 if he ends up dropping that far. And then the outside quarterbacks, I think Desmond Ridder. I think you look at the Saints. I think that they, with 2 picks now, I think there's a chance they take another quarterback. And if they don't, maybe it's Pittsburgh. I can't see Pittsburgh rolling into the season with Mitchell Trubisky and telling us, yeah, that's their guy. Maybe a quarterback's a little rich, but Desmond Ridder would be the guy that if you could get that 5th-year option, that would be the quarterback that makes the most sense out of this group for me.
All right, Russ, as we sit here several weeks before the draft, we can look at who's got what picks and do some healthy projecting. The Eagles and the Saints got it kicked off about 10 days ago with a big deal. The Saints adding a first-round pick, Eagles getting a future first and another pick on top of it, and the juxtaposition of a couple positions. Doesn't usually happen this far away from the draft, as big a deal as that was, but it did. And I know what the Eagles were looking to do to spread out their draft capital. I'm not sure what the Saints were doing. You want to give us some healthy speculation? Johnny just asked you about quarterback, and the Saints re-signed Jameis Winston, but does that give them the quarterback of the future? What do you think the Saints were looking to do? Is it just that good a draft that they feel they needed that kind of capital, or are they involved with a quarterback that's going to come off the board? We've debated this trade back and forth since it came down, more so from the Eagles side. What do you think the Saints' motive was?
I think it's just about giving themselves some capital for this year to kind of do what you're saying, looking at the quarterbacks in this draft and maybe seeing what falls in a certain spot. Does a Malik Willis or a Kenny Pickett, do they fall to 10 or 11 or 12? And is that a good enough jump for them to take both of those picks and move up and still get that quarterback? I think that's very much so what they're looking at doing. If they're not doing that, I think they're just trying to put themselves in position for an offensive tackle and a wide receiver. I mean, we know they need wide receiver help. Michael Thomas, his days seem to be done and out of there. They don't have a left tackle right now. Armstead signs with Miami, so they could very well be looking at a Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. Maybe there's an outside chance of Charles Cross falling in this draft. I know, at the start of this thing, he was like a top 10 pick, but you're looking at mock drafts now, and he's not even in the first round. So I don't know if something came up, but I did know the New York Giants were very much linked to him during this process, but now I'm not seeing him mocked there. So I don't know. And that's from like the more well-connected Daniel Jeremiah's of the world. So I do wonder, is there something up with that? But other than that, I mean, I don't know if they would go another position outside of quarterback, offensive tackle, receiver. I think those are the most glaring needs. And again, I think they're just going to wait to see what quarterbacks potentially fall or are made available and then go from there.
You know, it's interesting you bring up DJ Russ, and we had Ben Solak on from the Ringer last week, and he mentioned something that made me chuckle. So I wanted to get your thoughts on it. He said, anytime you hear guys like DJ or Todd McShay or Mel Kiper, they talk about the depth of the draft. That means the top of the draft. That's code for the top of the draft isn't what it typically is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that way? Because we talk about Aiden Hutchinson, number one. He's not Myles Garrett. He's not the Bosa's. He's not Chase Young.
Mm-hmm.
Do you buy into that? Maybe the tippy top of the draft isn't as good as it normally is.
Yes and no. I mean, I struggle with that one because I like the top of this draft of the edge rushers, but also I like the depth of this draft as well. I think it is just overall collectively a very talented group. I think when you look at a player like Arnold Ebiketie out of Penn State, I think he's a first round player. He's 18 or 19 on my board. I think he is that good of a player. And he's somebody that could very well be in the mix for a handful of teams in the top 20, top 25. But if you go to the second and third day of the draft, I mean, you look at Drake Jackson out of USC, very productive player, has that basketball background as well. I like him off the edge. Myjai Sanders out of Cincinnati would be that player, but he's just not there right now because his playing weight is all over. One day he's playing at 240 and then he checks in the combine at like 224. It's like, I don't know what to do with you. So I think it's a very deep group. I didn't even get into like Boy Mafi out of Minnesota. I like this group overall. It's Ben's awesome. Ben makes a great point there. But realistically, I think the top of this draft is relatively good at edge rusher, and I think you can again find some steals later on as well.
All right, Russ, last one for me, and we're going positionally again, because the Eagles may very well take a cornerback with one of their first two picks. They need to fill in the starter role with the fact that they haven't re-signed Steven Nelson. They could use to get younger at that position anyway. Sauce Gardner seems to be going somewhere in the top 10, maybe as high as number 4. I know Eagle fans just love him. I don't know if it's the nickname or they really did watch every Cincinnati game this year. I find that hard to believe. But he is probably not going to be available to them. But other than that, I think that any of the corners could come down to number 14. Stingley is higher ranked than some, not so high in others. Certainly Trent McDuffie could be a guy available to him. Andrew Booth is another one that has been potentially thought to be a mid-first round pick. Give us your, do you agree that Gardner is number 1 and probably is not going to be in there in the middle of the first round? And then give us your evaluations and rankings of the other corners who may be there for the Birds.
Yeah, Sauce Gardner is number 1 on my board. I certainly got lost in the sauce when watching him, but I also watched him when he was playing in high school. He played at Detroit King right down the road. So I went to 2 of his games. I watched him before he even committed anywhere in college. So he's always kind of had that, and I don't want to say it factor, but there was something about him. He was different on the field. You knew he was one of the better players every single time. So I don't think he'll be there. I'd be stunned if he wasn't a top 10 pick. Outside of that, you mentioned Derek Stingley. I think he's a top 15 player in this draft. He would be higher if he played more football over the last 2 years. He's only played in 10 games over the last 2 seasons. And that's a little concerning when you look at the number of games that a team like LSU has played over time. But you watch his true freshman season and you just hope I can get a guy like that with the ball skills and how well he plays through the catch point and just his overall athletic ability. It showed at his pro days. So I think there's a chance that, he could be already off the board, maybe, at 12 or 13, maybe something like that. He could certainly be there, but I like Trent McDuffie quite a bit. I think he would be somebody that I would be looking at if I'm the Eagles. 5'11", 193. He has shorter arms. That's a little bit of a concern for some people, but former 4-star recruit, really great overall athletic ability. He's able to run in the hip pocket of receivers as they run their crossing patterns across the field. I don't remember a time that I've really seen a corner do that as consistently as he does. I like the way he attacks downhill. So I like McDuffie in that regard. And then just, another cornerback, you mentioned Andrew Booth, but I'm going to go away from that for a minute, and I'm going to go Roger McCreary out of Auburn. I think he's more of a nickel, but he's very fluid, he's very aggressive, and he's very physical at the catch point. So I think the way he's able to start and stop maybe that top 20 is a little rich. So maybe trading back and you can get them, or maybe it's somebody you look at somewhere on day 2 and maybe you move up and try to get them. But Roger McCreary out of Auburn is somebody that I think is going to transition and be a solid pro, whether it's outside at times, but more so in the slot.
All right, going to finish up off the beaten path, Russ. Follow Russell Brown at Russ NFL Draft, cover1.net. If you're in Detroit, Woodward Sports in the Detroit area. I need a punter, Russ. How early is Matt Araiza going to go in the NFL Draft?
I could see 4th or 5th round, if I'm being honest, just because that late. I mean, he's booting them like 70 yards consistently.
I got to go 3rd round. I want to see a 3rd round punter.
When we finish this up, I am going to go to DraftKings and see if he's got a draft position on there yet. And if he does, I might take you on that. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, he'll probably be the first one off the board. He might be the only one drafted, to be completely honest. But yeah, he can certainly boot it. And I know some people that say, if you got 3 or 4 picks in the 1st round or in the top 50, you might as well roll the dice on this guy because he can flip the field for you, and that's a benefit. But I don't believe that.
We'll see if it plays out that way. Punter going in the Johnny's rooting day 2. This kid was a monster. I'm with him on that. Russ, great stuff. We appreciate you coming on. We'll probably invite you back after the draft has happened. We appreciate the preview. We'll take you on the flip side with the review. Thanks for jumping on board, bud.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Russ Brown from cover1.net giving us his draft insight. And he's not the first one to mention McCreary, J-Mac, the quarterback from Auburn.
Yeah.
Not going to be a 1st round pick. Probably not. I should never say never. But a high 2nd round pick. How he loves to play the draft game, moving in, moving out. If they don't like the cornerback that's left, if you go 2 different positions, and they could go D-line, wide receiver, all right, probably not safety and or linebacker because that's not their purview, but they may go with an offensive lineman. You never know. If they don't get a corner in the 1st round, they may need to get aggressive in the 2nd round.
Yeah.
And a guy like McCreary, who may go before where they're slotted to go in the 2nd round, could be someone they really take a look at. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your back-to-back guys. Aaron Bird's 3-6.5. Come back. We got some more Eagles stuff to break down. And then Chris Franklin, our buddy from NJ.com, is going to join us in hour number 2.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view. that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
Mac guys here on Birds 365. We still got an hour to play. As a matter of fact, Chris Franklin from NJ.com is going to join us coming up about 20 minutes. I did see this over the weekend with the Birds as well. The new additions, the Philadelphia Eagle free agent signings, have been assigned numbers for the upcoming 2022 season. And number 11 is going to be worn this year. We went 1 year without anyone wearing the number 11, which, of course, was worn by their former quarterback, who has got himself a new team as well after going to Indianapolis.
Is he going back to 11 there, by the way? Do we know? I heard
don't
rumblings.
know what his number is going to be with the Commanders. But it took them all of 1 year to take number 11 out of mothballs for the Eagles this year. And it will be worn by Zach Pascal, the Eagles' number 3 wide receiver as of right now. We'll see if that changes over the rest of free agency and leading into the draft. I got to tell you this one, Johnny Mac, because a couple of weeks ago we talked about the return of Kelly Green for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I was pretty pumped up about it. I think it's cool. I like the color. It does bring you back to yesteryear of Randall Cunningham and Reggie White and the like. Your take was you don't give whit one about it. The colors are completely irrelevant to you.
You know, you told me a story real quick about Ruben. You had Ruben Frank on.
Said the same thing.
WIP.
Same exact thing.
But Ruben, what you told me is Ruben will watch a game, and if you ask him 30 minutes later what were they wearing, he wouldn't know. I'm the same way. I have no stink. That's how little. I love the way he described it. That's how little it matters to me.
You guys were on the exact same page on that one. I'd become that with numbers. When I was a kid, and when I say kid, I do mean literally 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. By high school, I started to wane. At my advanced age now, numbers are completely irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
I don't care what number. I care about the color. Yeah, I like Kelly Green, but the whole number thing, if you're good enough to have your number retire, which means you got to be like borderline all-time great, then I think that's respect an organization can and should give you. There's a lot of fun for sports talk radio and the like when you have, should a guy's number be retired? If you're not good enough to be in that conversation, who the hell cares what number you wear?
Yeah.
I
just
saw a lot of
back
social
in the
media
bin.
response that, they're giving away Carson Wentz's number. It's not Carson Wentz's number.
No.
Somebody wore it before Carson. Carson wore it. Now Zach Pascal's going to wear it. Who the hell cares?
Yeah. You lease that thing. Yeah, it's not yours unless, and even then, I remember, you'll remember this name, Jody, but, certain organizations even, there are a number of organizations that if they retire a number, it means something. There are other organizations, and for me, the tipping point was a player by the name of Bingo Smith. Long before the Cleveland Cavaliers were, they were a bad team for a really, really long time before LeBron got there. And they're retiring numbers like Bingo Smith. It was a nice player, don't get me wrong, but I mean, he's not an all-time great, but you got to retire somebody's number when you're that hard for that long, and it becomes less than meaningful. Another I think the Eagles have only retired pretty significant numbers, so I give them credit for that. But for the most part, you're right, though. I mean, there's this weird, like you can't get Malcolm Jenkins, you can't give away his number. You got to wait a couple of years. You're not going to retire. But no, if you're not going to retire somebody's number, it goes back in the bin.
Right.
Just turn it over. You and I see it the exact same way.
I only have one question for you. How the hell do you even know that Bingo Smith's number is retired? How would you know that?
I used to cover the NBA, and I just happened to get in a wormhole one day, and yeah, they retired his number.
I remember Bingo Smith. You're right. He was a good player.
Not
even a very good player. Forget about great number. You got to be an all-time player to get your number retired. How the hell is Bingo Smith's number retired?
They had nobody else at the time. This was long before the LeBron James era. So, that
James guy, they could retire his number. That would be okay.
That's fine. That's fine. Two numbers,
those who
by the way.
Don't understand the business of sports. There's a really simple reason why they do something like that. On the given night that you're going to retire his number, you actually believe you're going to get a couple hundred extra people into the Wynn Arena, and you're going to sell some tickets. To sell off your organizational history for a couple extra hundred tickets for a bad organization, you know what that tells you? It's a bad organization. You got bigger problems than retiring numbers.
Yeah.
They at least got lucky and
got to pop a crowd. You're right, Jody. Might got to pop a crowd.
Just ridiculous. I do feel the need to mention this today, and it was as much of a downer over the weekend as anything that happened in the world of sports. We lost a very young man well before his time. Dwayne Haskins, former #1 pick out of Ohio State, went to Washington. The Eagles competed against him and did quite well. Thank you very much. Haskins thrown into the fray, wasn't ready to be a quarterback in the NFL. It got so bad in Washington to the point that they moved away from him and released him. And he ended up hooking on with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this weekend, he was down in the state of Florida, working out with teammates, and his competition at quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mitch Trubisky, who put the workouts together and brought his fellow quarterback in, which tells you Trubisky was ready for the competition, wasn't trying to Bigfoot anybody. And for some reason, he was out on a interstate highway in Florida and was attempting to cross the highway and was hit by a dump truck and lost his life at the age of 24 years old. His NFL career was short-lived, and it was not as good as it was expected to be when he was a mid-first round pick. But this is just a tragedy that you lose a young man as early in his life, and certainly in his career and in life in general at the age of 24. It brings us all back down to earth, as sports fans, football fans, and the like. Sometimes we ask tough questions and we get on players' cases because they don't live up to expectations. But they're human beings, just like the rest of us. And this kind of tragedy can befall anybody.
Yeah. And too many people put too much emphasis on football and, the passion of football, and forget, I talk to players all the time, obviously, and they forget that they're human beings and they have the same problems everybody else has. And, that they're in the public eye and they get paid a lot of money and things come along with that. When something like this happens, and I hope it's the case because, people, they haven't obviously confirmed it. I was told he ran out of gas. I hope that's the case and it's that simple, and obviously something tragic happened. But as for, some people are given scouting reports of Dwayne Haskins when he loses his life. I mean, at some point you got to turn it off. Football doesn't matter in that type of situation. And the one thing about Dwayne Haskins that everybody said, and you saw the outpouring, so many people so upset, Chase Claypool's out there crying, got along with everybody. I mean, everybody liked the kid. Everybody thought he was just such a great person. He admitted in the past, he didn't handle the pressure of being a first round pick, maybe the way he should have at certain times. But he's 24. He passed away at 24. I was a knucklehead when I was in my early 20s, Jody. I mean, I don't understand why people expect every single kid to be this, 35-year-old savvy veteran. I mean, they're all finding their ways in life just like anybody else. And once somebody that young passes away, I don't want to hear about his football resume. He was, first of all, if you make it to the NFL, you're better than 99% of the people that have ever played the game. So that's one, check mark. And it's just not relevant. I mean, at some point, you got to realize it's not that important. And that tragedy is the only word to describe it. And, all you can do is pray for his family and friends. But it was so untoward. And I don't want to pick on people, but it's just, I don't care what he did in the NFL. Kid lost his life, and it's terrible.
I think we need. I'm going to come to the defense and also pile on the football fans. A 24-year-old, 23-year-old, 22-year-old. When a young man comes into the National Football League and has had a great college career, and he is picked very highly in the NFL draft, and expectations are high, I think football fans have the right to critique his ability to play the game.
Sure.
That if your team is going to invest a draft pick on him, you're a fan of the team, you're going to give the guy responsibility, you're going to put him out there. You are certainly allowed to. You don't have to cut him slack because he's only 21 or 22 years of age. Some players come right in and are that good at that age. It's amazing that they're capable of doing it, but they can do it. It's the personal attacks that get the annoyance level on me, that they attack his character and or something about him that they don't like, and they just don't keep it to a football critique, that they expand their, not, that's where you have to take in the young man's age and say, yeah, but he's only 21. All right, so if he's not as focused as an 8-year NFL veteran, if he's still looking to enjoy life and he's not as dedicated, that's not for you to decide. You need to keep your characterization and critique to what he does on the football field, because you never know when something like this is going to happen. Young man lost his life at the age of 24. And for any of those who critiqued his ability to focus on his job or the type of work ethic that he had, you don't know it. You're not around the team. You're not there every single day.
No. And that's right. That's what we do. There's nothing wrong with criticizing people, and they understand. The players understand. The football part of it.
There's some that get their hackles up pretty fast.
But even so, if you want to take it to a local level, Jaylen Reagor's a young player who gets pretty criticized pretty regularly by me, by you, by everybody on the field. But then there's the other part, the personal attacks, which I don't agree with. He's a good kid. Hasn't worked out for him here. Ultimately, I think he'll get a second chance somewhere else. I'm on record. I don't think he's going to be here after the draft. But just because he failed as a first-round pick doesn't make him a terrible human being. He's trying, just like everybody else is trying. The Eagles are trying. Sometimes these things don't work out. And it's fair game to criticize a football player for football. It's very fair game. You probably stated it better than I did, so I appreciate it. It's the other stuff that bothers me, the personal attacks, which is just, and then after somebody loses, it bothers me on a normal level, on a day-to-day level. When somebody loses their life and you're still talking about personal attacks, that's over the top.
Don't understand it. And we here at Birds 365, I don't know if any of his family or friends or football fan who happen to find the show or turn into but anyone who's had any kind of relationship, be it as a former teammate or a former student at Ohio State or even a Commanders fan who may have thought the Commanders moved off him too quickly, it's just a tragedy. There's no other way to describe it when a young man of 24 years of age as an NFL player loses his life in any walk of life. It's a tragedy, but this is very specific to us here on Birds 365 because we talk football day in and day out. Again, our condolences to his family, his friends, anyone who knew him, anyone who was around him. And you're right, John. his teammates came out, and it's expected. And I'm not doubting any of them. I don't think any of them would put untruths out there, but everybody is going to emphasize the positive. But it was, to me, telling that it was almost universal across the board. They all came up with the same sentiment. I don't think there was a meeting, a conference call.
No.
Here's what we need to say about Dwayne Haskins. No, they were all honest when they put their tweets out into the social media world. They was just a fun-loving kid that everybody who was around him enjoyed being with them, and he always came in with a smile on his face and had a positive attitude. The fact that across the board that seemed to be the sentiment tells you about the kind of young man that we lost.
Yeah, it does. And it's one of those things. It's going to be difficult for everybody in sort of the extended world of Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State. You mentioned Washington, to right now in Pittsburgh, and everybody, I know Quincy Avery, Jalen Hurts' quarterback coach and Deshaun Watson's quarterback coach. He had mentioned, Dwayne was leaving to go work out with him. That's where he was going. Unfortunately, when he passed. So that was his next stop. And it's going to be difficult for that entire community that grew to know him. And I do think, once he failed in Washington, he was sort of on the back burner as far as NFL fans. And, understandably so, but it doesn't change the relationships, and that's the bigger part of it. And the relationships were still there, and especially you saw all his teammates at Ohio State just talking about, what you just said. What a good person he was. What a good leader. How he lifted everybody up, and that's part of the reason probably he became a first round pick. And maybe he didn't play enough. We talked about, with just Russ Brown, about, just a normal evaluation of a player coming out in this draft. And he mentioned, Aiden Hutchinson versus Trayvon Walker. One's played a lot, one hasn't. And maybe he didn't play enough to hit the ground running. Maybe there would have been a second chapter to his story. Maybe he would have gotten an opportunity and maybe turned it around. And that's the tragedy of it all. You're never going to know that. He was 24 years old. He could have recovered. If there's an injury in Pittsburgh, he could have been in there, and he could have played, and he could have. It's just terrible. It really is.
And then, as I stated before, when I first heard this news, I just couldn't believe it. It's so funny how the world has changed. You and I have been doing this for long enough that you got this on SportsCenter or something like that. But now the information is so immediate that you find out on social media, on the internet, however you find out, and you immediately go somewhere else to see if there's more information on what happened. It just gives you the right to pause and take a deep breath and go, man, sometimes we take sports too seriously.
Oh, yeah.
We love our teams. We want to be fans. It's a great escape. Anybody who's watching this show right here, right now, is a huge football fan. And they live, sleep, eat, breathe football, and they love their birds. But there are other aspects to life that you got to remember from time to time when you're getting mad, when you're getting critical, when you're going down the road of potential personal attacks. They're human beings, just like you and me. And tragedy happens in their lives, and it happens in the lives of players and teams and the like. So when you next want to get really annoyed about what's happened with your team in your sport, you're a fan of, just remember you're going to take a shot at someone's child and potentially somebody's dad. Not the case with Dwayne Haskins because he was only 24 years old, but you get the point I'm trying to make. It brings you back down to earth, and I think we all need that from time to time.
I remember when Kobe passed away. That one hit me kind of hard. I've met him 2 or 3 times in my life, and by no means were we close. But you think about a larger than life figure like that, just going about and his daily routine, which is different from everybody else, because not many of us could take our kids with a helicopter to basketball practice. But for him, was just going about his daily routine. And the same thing with Dwayne. He's going about his daily routine and just bang. And that's it. And it puts in a perspective. And look, we do this for a living. Sports are very important to us. And, I try to take it more seriously than I think most people as far as evaluation of the sport and the players and the teams. But at the end of the day, yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, there are far bigger things in life. It is an escape. That's what it is. It's entertainment. It's an escape. It is. And when good things happen, like the Eagles win the Super Bowl, the whole city and the whole community can get behind it and have a nice moment. And that's what it is. But that's all it is. You got to go back to your real life the next day. And you got to put it in its place. You got to put it in its perspective.
Sometimes reality smacks us upside the head, and we have to deal with it. And that was the case this weekend with the tragic loss of Dwayne Haskins. All right, Mac guys, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. Still got 40 minutes left to talk some football today. Our condolences to all the family, friends of Dwayne Haskins, and those who got a chance to know him and interact with him. But Dwayne knows, like we know, life goes on for those of us who are still here. So we'll continue talking about Birds football. Our buddy Chris Franklin from NJ.com scheduled to join us. He's next here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
You got your Mac guys. That would be John McMullen and Jody McDonald. Hoping to hear from Chris Franklin from NJ.com, scheduled to join us here. Hasn't off the board yet, but hopefully we'll get him up before the show comes and goes. John, no movement on the free agent end other than the Eagles signing a college wide receiver who hasn't played college ball in 6 years. Well, he's won a couple of U.S. championships at 110-meter hurdles and competed in the Olympics twice, but he hasn't caught a football in 6 years.
Yeah.
So we don't believe the Eagles have upgraded at wide receiver, but you're throwing a dart at a wall and you're hoping blindfolded to be able to hit the middle of the target. Maybe they will. You never know. But there are still some veteran wide receivers that are out there on the free agent market. Have you heard any new news on Jarvis Landry? The last I heard was he was asking, looking for a $20 million pay hit this year, which I like Jarvis Landry. I think Jarvis Landry would look real good in an Eagle uniform, even better than Devonta Parker, who I wanted to see the Eagles be more aggressive and go after, and I think they could have gotten him and should have gotten him. They didn't. I know that that's an outrageous number, and he's trying to glom onto what the top flight wide receivers got this year in contract reconstructions. He's not that type of a player, but he's still a damn good player. Have you heard anything on Jarvis Landry, team interest? Yeah, he's got to come down off that number, but
yeah, not since that number. And I'm trying to get Chris here too as I'm saying this, so bear with me. But not since that number. And obviously, yeah, he's got to come down, and it's going to be interesting. You know, it's always difficult. There's a guy who, you know, has had a lot of success in the league, and a lot of volume, a lot of receptions over the years, and thinks about himself in a certain way. And sometimes, you know, that's difficult. I talk all the time about how it's difficult for players to, you know, say, all right, I'm at a different stage in my career. Maybe I'm not what I was at some point. And until they come off that, it's going to be difficult to get in a situation. But obviously the Eagles are not going to be in the range of what he wanted. So, I mean, it becomes down, very similar to what we talked about with Honey Badger. If it comes down to a decent number, maybe it enters the conversation. Where I'm a little bit different, though, on those two particular players. As you know, Jody, I've been from the start of this. You know, I think it's different for receivers who, if they have other options, they're going to go where they get the football. I forget who said it. Maybe you remember, but I thought it was a great description of the position. It's the most selfish position in sports. They want the football. And if there's going to be a situation where they can get the football, obviously money always comes first. So if you offer the most money, you got a good chance. But when it comes to receivers, they need the football.
They do. And if you believe that the Philadelphia Eagles this year are going to run the same exact offense that they did last year, and your wide receiver who's not going to be getting a Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams type deal, where the numbers that you put up this year will reflect the kind of money you're going to get paid next year, I can see where wide receivers would at least question the Philadelphia Eagles. And so let me ask the question this way, because I think your point is accurate, but I think it's in some people's minds, potentially wide receivers and the like, written in stone. Should the Eagles be trying to change the narrative around their team? Should they be making the coach available and having him come out and say, we had the success we had last year, but next year we're looking to throw the football more? He certainly talked about that at the NFL meeting. Are they not hammering that point home enough for general intake around the National Football League, specifically targeting free agent wide receivers? Have they not made that well enough known that in a perfect Eagle world, they would like to throw the ball more than they did this past year?
Well, let's bring in Chris Franklin, and maybe he can help us answer that question. There we go.
Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
Chris Franklin, NJ.com. Good to see you, Chris.
Good to see you, too. Sorry about that.
C. Franklin News. Follow him on Twitter. Jody and I were just discussing receivers, and we know what we've been through. We have a 110-meter Olympian hurdle. So, but I don't think that's what they want to do to improve. So we're talking about, and Jody was mentioning, do the Eagles need to do a better job explaining to veteran receivers that they're going to get the football more if they come here? Is there sort of this disconnect with some of these receivers thinking, I don't want to go there, I'm not going to get the football? And do you think they need to do a better sell job?
I think so, because when you look at the guys, like when you've come out and say, yeah, we got guys like Devonta and Dallas, and we want to make sure we get them their touches, 100 plus targets a season. And oh yeah, by the way, we'll feed you some crumbs. Be going to be happy with that. Because over time, you just start to think like, nah, I'll go elsewhere and maybe get some more targets. I think that they have to if that's their true thinking, I think that's a little concerning. I know Smith can get in. I know Dallas is really good, but if you can get a top tier wide receiver, okay, yeah, that works out. And I think the only way they're going to be able to get somebody like that now is trade, because at least by then say, hey, we got your rights. Either you come on the field and you play, or sorry, you're out. So they have to do a better job with that.
Trade and or draft. And they have two
True.
first-round draft picks, and we all kind of believe they'll be targeting a wide receiver with one of those two first-round picks, even though it'll be the third consecutive year they've taken a wide receiver in the first round with mixed results. I don't know that we've asked you this. The top wide receivers in the draft, give us your rankings. Assume that all are left on the board when the Eagle pick. That's probably not happening, but just hypothetically. Give us the way you rank them, who you think will be on the board, who you think they'll be there for the Eagles to choose, and which way you think they're leaning.
I think Drake London, I think really is for me. I think he really is a top for me for basically what the fit this team needs, because when you look at his size, and I know everybody keeps saying, oh, it's JJ Arcega-Whiteside incarnate, it happened for the second version. I think he's still all right. I think he can still be that guy, that X receiver. And then I look at Garrett Wilson. I think he does really well. I think he could be really good in this offense and be that speed guy that you hope Jaylen Reagor would have been, but we saw what happened there. And then you have, I think, looking after that, Treylon Burks for me, then followed by Chris Olave. I think those guys. But the one guy, I think Sky Moore, I'm really high. If they don't pick one, see, for me, I think I don't think they use the first two on a wide receiver. I think they go in like second or third round. I really think there's a certain round for like a Sky Moore or somebody else around there, and hopefully not Christian Watson, because we've seen what happened with North Dakota guys. But you never know. I really think I'd really look at a Garrett Wilson or Drake London.
Is that because of Devon Allen? They don't have to go in the first round.
you know, when it comes to guys like that, you think like, hey, you know what? I think this is a person right here. Now, see, the only thing I can see him being is like a kick returner, because
they need a kick returner. That's a good point. They need a kick returner. They need a punt returner. Yeah. They need special teams help. They were bad on special teams. But before we get on that track, you mentioned Jaylen Reagor, Chris. Mm-hmm. I want your percentage. It's May 1st. Percentage Jaylen Reagor's on the Philadelphia Eagles May 1st after the draft.
25. And that's being kind. I really think, looking at a lot of these moves that they made right now and the talk of the receivers and the way this room is shaping out to be, if you can't consistently catch the ball, if you can't consistently run the right routes, okay, he's gone. You can't do that. If you're fumbling, if you can't really handle punts and you're constantly bobbling that, then you start to question, like, okay, what do you bring to the team? And if you can't do both of those, and the way this roster currently is constructed, I just don't see him on here for long term. I don't think he makes it out of training camp.
All right, Devon Allen. You know, he reminds me of who I thought of today.
Jeremy Bloom.
Thought of him in 10 years.
Jeremy Bloom. Jeremy Bloom.
Jeremy Bloom. The last time the Philadelphia Eagles went wide receiver on an Olympic star. And oh, by the way, I'll take a track and field guy over a skier every day of the week. But yeah, and Bloom wasn't terrible. They did use a draft pick on him and didn't get a lot. I would call him a mediocre success at best, but he wasn't a failure. And they're risking even that much less. But rolling the dice with former Olympics, I'm not sure about. And oh, by the way, I would call London at worst. You a little disrespectful there, Mr. Franklin, calling him the next JJ Arcega-Whiteside. No, he's the combination of JJ Arcega-Whiteside and Nelson Aguilar, because you got to take in consideration USC. So if you take a USC player with a big player who can block and doesn't necessarily catch, that's what you may have.
If you take, I think, I'm not sure, but failure plus failure probably equals failure.
I learned that, I learned in math, if you take two things, you cancel them out, it actually makes a positive. So maybe
All
that's
right.
There you go, Franklin. Good job out of you.
That's that new math. I can't do the new math.
Thanks for smacking in. You helped me out when it came to math. It came in handy here.
Yeah, I definitely can't do the new math. But I don't think we haven't talked to you since the big trade. And I give Howie Roseman credit from a valuation standpoint, as I always say. Obviously, you look at any trade chart, he got the best of Mickey Loomis by a significant degree. Now, ultimately, you got to turn it into players, but just the philosophy, the sentiment of the trade, the kick in the can to get another pick in 2023. What does it tell you about this team right now and where they are specifically? Let's be blunt, at the quarterback position with Jalen Hurts. What does it tell you, that trade?
I think that trade tells me that as much as they keep saying that they believe in him, they really truly don't. And I disagree with that sentiment. I thought that I understand why they did it. I understand that they needed to get more pieces to possibly trade for another quarterback next year. I get that. But when you finally have a guy who's been in the same system for 2 straight years in a row now, you got a guy who's shown that he can improve a little bit more. I'd probably talk a little bit of belief in that way too, but I think it's just more just to help them out. I think I know it's a smaller move, especially with that. I think it helps a little bit with the salary cap. I think they were trying to hope to sign somebody else a little bit more, but not having to pay another first-round draft pick and get to defer that to next year. I think that was a little boost, but we've seen what's going on with the free agent market, so that's not really doing. But
yeah,
that's not really helping out right now.
All right, Chris, I'm sending this question your way, but Johnny, if you want to jump in and answer it as well, appreciate it. The Eagles lost a couple of key front office personnel during this offseason, guys that have gone elsewhere to become assistant general managers. To my knowledge, they have not hired anyone to replace either of these two guys. Now, the Eagles have a pretty good front office staff to begin with. John and I have kind of poked some fun at the Bengals during this year, the Super Bowl competing Bengals, and the size of their staff as compared to someone like the Eagles. So I'm not saying the Eagles are woefully undermanned, but I don't know that they've used anybody to replace those guys. And if they haven't, then the dynamic come draft time changes. That they always tell us about the collaborative effort that it is, and a lot of people's opinions are sought, and then a decision is made draft day. It's Howie's final call, but he leans on a lot of people for that information. As far as you can tell, Chris, your sources, how things are working as we're now less than 3 weeks away from the draft, are the Eagles missing those two individuals that left to go elsewhere? And is there a different dynamic in this upcoming Eagle draft this year because of it?
From what I've heard a couple weeks ago, that they basically haven't replaced those guys truly in full and earnest, and that Roseman's had to take a little bit more of the onus of himself. But I think when it comes to that as well, too, that's why one reason why they put that proposal on the table and they joined the 3 other teams, such as the Bills and Ravens, to not have everybody to basically raid them. I think when it comes, you look at this now, I think of all time, it's the last moment you possibly want to having all these first round picks. And when you lose Ian Cunningham and when you lose Brandon Brown, guys who knew what the way the organization run, the philosophy was, who started to know what these coaches wanted to, and you lose them now. You lost them 2 months before the draft was supposed to happen. That does impact you. That's a lot of knowledge, a lot of resources that went into them. And when you look at the future, I think the onus is going to be more on Roseman. I think there'll still be that collaboration. You'll still hear Sirianni, still hear Gannon, still hear Steichen. All these guys will still have a say in what the guys they want. And when the draft room ultimately falls on Howie, but I think it's going to affect them. I think these guys were really, really good, in my opinion. They were good talent evaluators, especially in the scout. They came from the college scouting department as well, so they really focused on that too. But a lot of that work was done during the season, so they have some of the notes. But I think when it comes down to it, it's going to wind up being, I think it's going to be a huge loss for them, especially one that's going within the division to the Giants.
Yeah, and Howie was upset about that one specifically because it was obviously a division rival, and that's Brandon Brown. But Let's stay off the field, and since it's landscaping season, I can't get these mowers slowing. But because a number of teams started their off-season work today, Chris. Some started last week. These are only teams with new coaches that can start this early. But the Eagles could start April 25th, April 18th. They are starting April 25th. They're not having a mandatory minicamp. They're one of two teams in the entire NFL not having a mandatory minicamp, along with those Cincinnati Bengals, Jody. What the heck is going on here? Why do the Eagles, do they think it works so well in the pandemic era? You don't have a lot of time with these players to begin with. Why are the Eagles intent on lessening that time?
When I hear like they don't have a mandatory, to me, it's like that Catherine Hahn gif, what they do from a WandaVision with a little winking, go, hey, you're not going to that one. Yeah, I think it's one of those things, like it's not mandatory, but I think it's one of those things where Nick is still trying. I think he probably listened to the veterans. I think when you look at what happened last year when it came to mini camps, the way they worked it out, because they didn't want to come in, and it was like, hey, you know what? They worked it out. I think he wants to keep that open, like, hey, you know what? I don't want to force you guys to come in here. But I think you'll probably see everybody. I think you'll see close to everybody there, especially from. I know a few people want to be there. So they're going to be there as well too. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see nearly a lot of people there at the actual mini camps, even though they're not mandatory. Because
I agree.
I
they're going to have close to 100% at voluntary. But I mean, it's this. If you ask the players, they're going to say, "Well, we don't need that." And to be honest, look, the Jason Kelce's and the Fletcher Coxes of the world, Lane Johnson, they don't need it. They don't need that nonsense. I talk about it all the time. But it's pretty meaningful for the young players who aren't even here yet, the guys they're going to draft, the undrafted free agents. At some point, you got to stand up to the veteran players and say, all right, you got to come in for 3 days. I'm sorry, but you got to come in. I mean, Nick's a nice guy, but sometimes you can't be the players' friends. You got to be their boss. 3 days is 3 days. And if they're not going to come in for voluntary work because they got to show up for 3 days in June, maybe you're not building the right program. If that's the case, is that where we are?
I don't think so. I think it's one of the things that I think if you're changing the whole defensive system now, I think it's going to be key. Just all of a sudden you see all the defensive guys there, and it was a week mandatory. I think that's when you'll start to see maybe there's something here where they may be tweaking the defense a little bit more, and that's when it's called a mandatory. Like, we're not calling it mandatory, but you better daggone know that he's texting them a lot, saying show up here, or we'll start to look to replace you. I see one of those things happening. But I think overall, I think everybody knows what their job is, and I think everybody knows what they have to do. So in this, especially in this day and age, if it was about like 10 years ago, I think we see this more and more. But I think more and more teams, I wouldn't be surprised to see the following year, we see more and more teams not call it mandatory. We're going more towards that because everybody, for better or for worse, everybody's more lax about this stuff now and say, hey, you know what, we're just going to worry about really being physical around toward the later into training camp and more into the season, as opposed to putting extra stress throughout the season now.
See, Franklin, something we talk about a lot here on the show, and we should, because it is part of an off season in the National Football League, is leverage. The players always think they have leverage. The teams always think they have leverage. It's finding that middle spot where your belief in leverage meets the team's belief in leverage. We're in a unique position right now, 2 weeks before the draft, where both probably think they've got the leverage. The players think, well, they want a given. I'm a given. They don't have to worry about the draft if they sign me. And the teams are thinking, oh, yeah? You're not going to take our offer? You realize how many draft picks we have, right? We're going to get a younger, cheaper guy in here, and you're going to turn down our offer. Who really is in the better leverage spot? 2 weeks away from the draft. Is it players or is it teams? Who's got more leverage right now?
I'd probably say teams right now have more leverage, especially if you have 5 picks in the first 101 picks, 5 pick selections in the first 101 goes, oh, yeah, really? We can get one of the best 100 college players right now to come in. Well, you hope 100 best ones, but you hope we're going to get one right now for it. If you want to keep running your mouth and saying, hey, no, you can't do this, well, we'll just get rid of you. I think it's more towards that point now. And I think the teams have it before then, and then I think the players have it a little bit more toward like June 1st and everything, because everybody's going to make that mad dash of trying to fill out the rest of their rosters ahead of training camp, and then you start to see more and more. I think players have a little bit leverage, especially when teams get desperate if there's injuries and stuff like that. So right now, I think teams have a little leverage, and they may be nudging a little bit more. I think when you look at what they did with the Eagles, did with Rodney McLeod, even though it pretty much said, hey, you know what, we're going with Anthony Harris and we're not signing it, but I think they had a little bit more leverage if they wanted to bring him back and just go, you're going to take this number here, and if not, then we'll just go in a different direction. And I think ultimately what they did that there.
You mentioned those first 101 picks, Chris, and how much the Eagles have. So a lot of people understandably focus on the first round, 15 and 18, but I want to go in a different direction because I want to talk about those 101. That's where you want guys to contribute at least. So obviously you want starters at the top, but you want at least contributors. Give me one guaranteed position. The Eagles are, no question, in those top 101 picks, in one position they're guaranteed not to take in those top 101 picks.
Ooh. Guaranteed. That's a good question. I'd probably go quarterback. I probably would, because I'm looking right now. I think Malik Willis will go. I don't think they're trading up for Malik Willis. I don't think Kenny Pickett's coming here. I don't think Matt Corral's coming here. I think the Saints, wouldn't be surprised if the Saints took Matt Corral at 18. And some of the other guys are there. I think they're, if anybody, I think they trade for one. So I'd probably say quarterback now, with tackle being a close second, given that you have Lane and Jordan Mailata. But I really think right now, I think unless something pops up where we see Malik Willis in like a gas mask with a bong or something like that popping up and he falls that way, hit, wink, wink. But yeah, unless we see something like that, I don't foresee him. And then when you look at Pickett and Corral, I just don't think they'll go out their way to pick somebody like that. And Carson Strong, well, I like Carson Strong though. But
let me follow that one up. If Carson Strong, Matt Corral.
Well, I need your guaranteed prediction first, Jody. So what position are they guaranteed to come out of? There's probably a lot. But if you're saying, even if things fall in a negative, say the top 5 edge rushers aren't there at 15, are they still going to get one at 101? They're still going to get a receiver no matter what, which is the one position you say 100% they're coming out of there.
I like Chris's two choices. I would just flip-flop the order. I think it's more so tackle than quarterback, because if Matt Corral drops down to the 3rd round, now I don't think that's happening, but some people don't like him. I happen to like him a lot. John has said here on the show that they're bigger fans of Howell than I am. Those are the two guys I continue to come back to in a comparison. I like Matt Corral a lot. I don't like Sam Howell a little bit. John seems to believe the Eagles like Sam Howell a lot, and I have no idea what their opinion is on Matt Corral. But if one of those guys is sitting there in the 3rd round, they did it just a couple of years ago and took Jalen Hurts when they thought he was value in the 2nd round, and a lot of dominoes fell thereafter. Oh, I think they could take a quarterback in the 3rd round again. And now it's going to have to be specialized. It's going to have to be that guy. But if the guy does fall that far down, I don't know if a top left tackle falls that far down that they're taking a left tackle even at 101. So that's why I would go with tackle over quarterback as a position they won't be levitating to.
Yeah, Sam Howell to me is Mitch Trubisky light, and that's even saying a lot too. But I think your landscapers, John, just coming over this way, so I apologize on that one too. But I look at Sam Howell, and I just look at his game, and there's too many times where he was to me he was inconsistent, and that ACC was not a tough conference last year.
Yeah,
and he struggled at times. I know they're gonna say, "Oh well."
Yeah, I don't like the offense. I tell Jody all the time, I hate their offense. I hate the way they run their offense. He did lose a ton of skill position talent from the year prior. You see all those guys. Javonte Williams, who I love Javonte Williams as a player. Michael Carter, Dynamic Brown. They had another receiver that was drafted. I always forget his name. They had a ton of talent at the skill positions at North Carolina that left, that kind of explained the downtick in production. But I think more so, I think too many people get caught up on what prospects did at the college level, and that's the trick. It's not about what you did at the college. It's about evaluating what you're going to do at the pro level. But I don't like the player either, Jody. I just think
You're just giving us your information from the Eagles. I understand. So I'm not disagreeing with you, John. I'm disagreeing with the Eagles if they think he's a player. I watched the player play with talent around him as a junior, with less talent around him. Why wouldn't he elevate any of those players? Because he's not that good a quarterback, and I don't think he's going to be a good pro quarterback.
And by the way, I think the trade indicates they're not taking a quarterback. I'm firmly in that camp that they now made the decision that they're not taking a quarterback.
Didn't you say that 2 years ago when they had Jaylen Hurts as their second round? They're not taking a. They just gave Carson Wentz a contract. They're not taking a quarterback.
I wasn't even. I might have said it because it was stupid, but. Jaylen Hurts, it went the way it went. Now, the Eagles' thought process, I thought, was sound when they drafted Jaylen Hurts. They drafted Jaylen Hurts to be a cost-effective backup because their starter was always injured, which I think is pretty sound thinking, but it doesn't take into effect the human element of, hey, not everybody's okay with that, and that's how it kind of unfurled. So do you think the Eagles learn from that and they just say, because the offseason's been the offseason, Chris, and the Eagles can say whatever they want, but we look at their actions, whether it's checking in on Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, whether it's making this trade, which is basically a neon light saying safety net, safety net, safety net. We don't believe in the quarterback. Is it just they can do this now because they happen to have a quarterback that is mentally strong to handle it, whereas not everybody. In fact, it's probably more likely that it would go in a negative direction. This is one of the unique positives of Jaylen Hurts from my perspective.
Well, I think I still think even with that one, I think it'd be more telling even when you look at the first round or anything like that for it, even the guys there, I don't know. Like, I don't foresee him being somebody who he's mentally strong, and I think he's somebody who you won't see starting to shirk away from it, even though I know people are going to bring up, oh, look what he did when he went to Alabama and Oklahoma. He didn't want to compete. Well, I think that's a whole different situation. But I think overall it won't matter. It won't matter. And if they do take one, it'll be like a 6th or 7th round, like a Bailey Zapp type of guy who just throws a lot. And
the kid from Brown.
EJ Perry, I think I actually have him higher than Sam Howell personally. I think he throws a little bit better touch, especially when it's sideline out. Yeah,
he's smart.
It's Jay Fiedler part 2 for the Eagles. There you go.
And just saying this: if the right guy is there in the 3rd round at 83, which is going to make it a day 2 pick, don't discount the possibility of the Eagles taking a quarterback. Now, I don't know if that guy's going to be on the board still. But I'm just saying they've already shown a propensity to, as John correctly described, and nobody understood this when I said it. They're drafting Jaylen Hurts to be a low-value, good salary backup quarterback to Carson Wentz. And everyone, you can't do that. How he got it right when he did it, and I sniffed it out ahead of time. And I think they may do that again in the 3rd round this time. Last thing for you, Chris Franklin, running a little late. Rodney McLeod, not going to be back, signs a contract with the Colts. They'll find a way to replace what he did on the football field this last year where he didn't start. He started injured, didn't hit the ground running, took him time to get healthy enough to make a big play in the last game of the season. Thanks for that, Rodney. Helped the Eagles make the playoffs last year. How are they going to replace him as a leader? The safety position has been a leader for the Eagles from Dawkins into Malcolm into Rodney. It doesn't have to be, but that's just the way it's been with the Eagles. How big a loss is his leadership on this defense?
I think it's huge because when you look at what he did, when you think about that plane ride they took back after that, they got blown out by they basically dominated by the Raiders, and think you have guys like that turn things around and try to spark things. I think it's going to be huge. And look, when it comes defensively, I don't see anybody in that defensive backfield right now that plays safety doing that to step up a little bit. Maybe, perhaps, but I think the easiest one to insert is going to cost you a little bit, and that's Tyrann Mathieu. I think people respect him. I think people do that, and he can insert him as a leader. But when you look at what you have right now on that roster with Marcus Epps, if there's a special teams, maybe he can be the captain.
Come on.
Special teams,
Epsie's my guy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But yeah, if he's a special teams captain, if he wants to replace Alex Singleton as special teams captain, hey, more power to him. But I don't know if he's that type of leader for the defensive side of things on that.
No, but Anthony, you know what? Anthony Harris is a leader, and he's a good guy off the field too.
That's true.
And it's ironic that, Rodney and Anthony Harris were college teammates. They ended up as professional teammates. And maybe Rodney sort of mentored Anthony Harris into a leadership position, at least for a year.
We'll have to wait and see. Chris, great stuff. Sorry we got you a little bit late today. We'll punch up again in a couple of weeks. Draft is right around the corner. We'll continue to have fun with it, and we'll have fun with you whenever you come on. Thanks for joining us, bud.
Thanks, guys. Got to do a better job looking at spam.
Chris Franklin, NJ.com, here with us on Birds 365. All right, quickie timeout. Come back. We got to put a bow on the show here on Birds.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you. Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
You got your Mac and Mac guy, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, wrapping up a Birds 365 as the countdown. The draft continues to play on. We're going to try and get a bunch of draft guys up between now and the Thursday of night one of the NFL draft. Let me follow up with you because I posed a question to Chris, and I don't know if you got a full chance to answer it. The two front office guys who decided to take their axe to Chicago and New York during this offseason were contributed to the Eagles. We're not flies on the wall during the draft preparation and or then draft day, but Jeff Lurie certainly talked them up as potential general managers. They were, at least in his eyes, key members of the Philadelphia Eagles staff, and they haven't replaced him. I understand there's some uneasiness about taking someone else's player. People don't want to leave their teams because they committed to them leading up to the draft. Didn't seem to bother the Eagle guys to go to another team leading up to it, but the Eagles haven't been able to replace him or have chosen not to replace him. How big a deal is that in the Eagles war room this year, John?
Yeah, I don't think it's optimal, as Howie Roseman explained. But they've been through it before. In 2016, he mentioned where Tom Donahue essentially stepped up when things shifted, and they had a sort of short, for them, lesser scouting staff. And guys will step up. You know, the biggest concern is the Eagles got that rule changed, by the way, at the meetings. You can now not hire secondary football executives, as they are called, so non-GMs, until after the draft now. So they were successful. They were one of, I think, 3 teams sponsoring that. So they were successful in changing the calendar. They will make promotions and hire people after the draft. That's how scouting works. So if they're going to, for instance, typically in the history, how they've done things is they will promote people. So Anthony Patch, who's currently the senior director of college scouting, he'd be a likely guy who might get promoted to Ian's job or Brandon's job. Alan Wolking, TJ McCray. They have a lot of guys that maybe people haven't heard of. The bigger concern is Andy Weidel is one of the guys who interviewed for the Steelers GM job. Kevin Colbert's retiring after the draft. And there is a Pittsburgh beat reporter who's very close to the team who says Weidel's the leader in the clubhouse to be in the Steelers GM. So if they lose Andy Weidel on top of it, then you got a big concern. They still have Dave Caldwell, remember, the former GM at the Jaguars. So they have a lot of talent, as Jeffrey Lurie calls it. They're always adding talent to the front office, but they will make those changes as far as promotions and hires. They will make those after the draft. And Howie explained that at the combine. He actually explained that. And they went through it before 2016. So they have that fail-safe of Tom Donahue, who's been there for a long time. They went through it in 2016. He said there's no excuses, but they will make those changes after the draft.
Since Andy Weidel is guaranteed to be here through the draft, I worry about losing Andy Weidel when I lose Andy Weidel. And he is going to be a key contributor for him this year. More pressure on him because of the defections than probably even Howie. But we'll cross that worry bridge when we get to it, John. Don't have to worry about it before the draft. Where our worries are over for the day, because the show is. You good to go again tomorrow?
Let's do it. Give me a 2 and 2, Jody.
We'll be back with Birds 365 tomorrow in 2 and 2.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and